So it's a real pleasure to be joined by Caitriona Heffernan today. Caitriona, I met Caitriona when she did our CPI program a couple of years in quality improvement. But I think it's fair to say Caitriona's real love is innovation, and I think that places her in a really great position, I think, to be someone who has knowledge of quality improvement and seen the value of it, and to see where innovation kind of lies alongside it. So Caitriona is a speech and language therapist at the CUMH, the maternity hospital in Cork, but she's also now the HSE innovation lead for the Spark Innovation Programme in CUMH. And it's a real pleasure to be joined by you today, Caitriona, and I'm looking forward to hearing your talk. Before we bring your slides up, I'm just going to quickly see who's joining us. So we've got Alison and Jen from the Patient Safety Strategy team in the South-Southwest Hospital Group. We've got Kathy in Sanford, Aidan Bradley down in Cork, I think there, yeah. Kate in Kilkenny. We've got some nice kind of suggestions. Innovation is a new and better way of doing things. Innovation is creativity, finding solutions, sparking ideas, lots of ideas there, finding new ways of doing things smarter. Innovation is questioning the status quo. Systems thinking, radically changing how we do things. Wow. So Caitriona, I could think of no better segue to hand over to you. And you know, when we planned today's session, I think you were keen to kind of emphasize you know, you're not coming here as an expert, and this is very much, this is what you know. And I think, like all of us, we're trying to learn, and I'm looking forward to learning from you today. And I know this is how much you know, but it's a lot, and I'd like to hear it.
Check that you can hear me okay.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thanks a lot for a lovely welcome, and I'm delighted to be here speaking today. As you said, I very much on purpose called this talk This Much I Know, because I'm no expert, but I suppose I do hold the term innovation in two of my job titles. So hopefully I have something to bring to the table today around innovation. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the conversation that hopefully we'll have at the other side of this brief presentation, because definitely to learn hopefully from the participants on the call and from yourself as well, John. And I suppose as an outcome of some of the conversations that we might have, I think every time I have an interaction with somebody in the network, it changes my way of thinking about something, or I have a different viewpoint. So I suppose today's talk is really about me putting out there what my experience is from a practitioner's point of view, and then certainly being open to having those views shaped and changed as we go through the conversation. So I'm looking forward to that aspect. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about myself. As John said, I've had a few different iterations to use an innovation term. And yeah, I started my work in healthcare as a speech and language therapist and spent 17 years working in that area in the UK and Ireland. And I suppose before I knew about terms like quality improvement and innovation, I was always interested in how you might do things better and how we can provide services in a better way and do things more efficiently for better patient experiences, better patient outcomes. And I didn't realise that those things were real life strategies and visions for healthcare, particularly around things like the quadruple aim. So it was lovely to kind of start to meet that terminology then when I started to learn more about quality improvement and innovation. And I suppose feeling like I kind of found my place within healthcare. So as John said, I completed the course in quality improvement and leadership at RCPI, and just before that I completed the course in innovation in healthcare at Trinity College Dublin, the first year of that course run in conjunction between Trinity College and the Health Innovation Hub Ireland, who I have associations with down here in Cork as well. And then most recently I've become really interested in the area of design thinking, and I'm just finishing a postgraduate diploma in innovation through design thinking at UCC. So I suppose the three areas are kind of coming together for me, and like as John said, and as I will reiterate, for me, this is important to come as a practitioner around how I see these things playing out on a daily basis and where I see the intersections, the similarities, the synergies, and I suppose how they complement one another to provide great services. So as John said, I now have a couple of hats that I wear. So I'm the Innovation Programme Lead for Ireland South Women and Infants Directorate based at Cork University Maternity Hospital. And then most recently I've taken up the position of HSE Innovation Lead at the Spark Innovation Programme. So I was driving innovation at the front line on a national level. So that's been a really exciting transition as well. So I suppose I get to have my foot in both camps there. Trying to give input into national strategy about how we drive innovation and how we engage with our frontline workers to provide innovation at the front line, and also still working myself in my role at CUMH predominantly, trying to roll out things in that setting. So that's me in a nutshell. And I need to use my mouse, sorry. Now, there we are. So I suppose today we're here to talk about improvement and innovation and around their synergies. And I think, are they synonyms or are they synergies? And I think often the words are used interchangeably. And certainly I was very excited at the outset of this session that John asked people what the definition of innovation was, because I was only hoping somebody would tell me, because I have to say it's one of the things I find most difficult in my role, or in either of my roles, is when people ask me what innovation is, because I suppose it's really difficult to define because it changes depending on context. It changes depending on what lens you're viewing it through, what the outputs are, whether it's what the value creation you're looking for is. Is it monetary? Is it in the healthcare context better patient experiences, better outcomes? And sometimes all those three things come together, but it does change a lot. And you hear people talking about innovative solutions. She's very innovative. That is an innovative product. We're innovating that. We're at the front of innovation. So it really has so many different ways of being discussed that it's sometimes hard to put a nice easy frame around it. But generally speaking, the way that I divide the innovation portfolio within my role in Ireland South is that we have it within three pillars, I suppose. So technology, digital and process. So technology being more the kind of the medtech, medical device development or medical device implementation within practice. Digital then, as it says on the tin, more about your digital transformation, new IT solutions, and then process innovation, looking more at the way we deliver services, how efficient they are and how they're delivered, looking at lean methodologies, things like that. And so that's a very kind of loose differentiation between the three areas, and different areas around the country are looking at these portfolios in different ways. In some organizations, they're looking maybe at one at a time. And then in my case, like I said, we have a much broader lens, because really, I suppose I'm honoured that I'm in the first role of an HSE hospital-led innovation lead. So I suppose there was a lot in the last year of just kind of throwing a lot of things at the wall and seeing what was going to stick, where the traction was. And so we have elements going on in all three areas of the portfolio. But I think what I'm coming to the realization is that really finding the focus really relies on your understanding around the capability of the organization you're in, what capacity you have to deliver on change, innovation, improvement, what your cause is. As I said, whether if you're looking at from a med tech point of view, your cause might be value creation in terms of monetary, you might be looking at commercialization, or otherwise you're looking at maybe something more patient facing, more with more direct patient impact. And then of course the culture of your organization, what they're ready for, what they're up for, what they're interested in. And I suppose it's really, that's the trick, to find out what those four elements are in your organization. That really does guide what your innovation pathway will look like for now. You might want to shape it differently going forward and introduce different capabilities or introduce more capacity into the system to be able to handle something that you're particularly interested in pursuing. But I think as a first line of defence, that's what you look at, and then that will inform whether you're going after technology, digital or process innovation. So what is innovation and who are the innovators? And so, as I said, I was looking at some of the responses that you got there earlier, John, and people talk about things like change, they talk about radical change, and of course those are really exciting areas of innovation, and not all innovation is extremely radical. Sometimes it can be really simple solutions, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But what I will say is that, you know, innovation, a lot of people think it's about having a great idea, something that's like really a really forward thinking, out of the box, never been done before idea. And really innovation ideas are no good until you actually put them into action. And once you action them, they actually have to deliver value. So there has to be something in it for the person at the other end. So if it's commercialization, you have to have a customer, you have to have a buyer who's going to buy. And even if it's not commercialization, I think I'd really encourage people listening today who maybe feel that they sit more in the camp of quality improvement than innovation in the traditional sense of the word. Ultimately, you're still looking for venture capital. You know, you're still looking for somebody to invest in your idea, whether it's you want money from them to do something about your idea, or whether the investment is more around buy-in, getting backing from senior leaders in your organization. Ultimately, it's the same thing. You still have to pitch in the same way, regardless of whether you're looking for money or support. And I think the other great thing is that we're really coming to the conclusion now that the lone genius is really dead. You know, it's very rare now that you have the Mark Zuckerbergs or any of those kind of big leaders in the IT world that we would kind of traditionally think of as innovators. I think the curtain is starting to come up now. We realize that there are teams and teams of people behind these great innovators, and I think that's very reassuring for us. Who maybe aren't going to be creating the next Apple product, that actually we don't have to have all of the answers ourselves. And even if you look way back in history, you know, somebody like Thomas Edison that's lauded as being the inventor of the light bulb. Well, I mean, he didn't invent the light bulb, actually. There were people able to use filaments to create light a lot earlier than Edison. But actually what he did was creating the light bulb applicable to use in wider society. And in order to be able to do that, he set up hundreds of companies that were involved in, you know, creating wiring around the United States. He set up the General Electric in the United States in order that his light bulb actually had function. So I think that's a really good example of that whole idea of an idea being put into action and then that it actually creates value at the other end. And that's where you get innovation. So sorry, now I'm not forgetting, I need to use my mouse. So like I said, look, innovation is everywhere. So just for a bit of tongue in cheek, I forgot we were doing a lunchtime session, so I apologise if anyone was eating their sandwich, but I just had a quick Google the other day when I was putting these slides together and looked for, you know, what's innovative in the toilet roll industry. And it's incredible what you get. You know, everybody's talking about innovation, it's everywhere. So you've got things like, you know, biodegradable products. So there the innovation is around, you know, the green, more ecologically focused. You've got some up there in the right that are going to kill the bacteria in the water, that there's something in the toilet paper that actually kills bacteria to make the water less damaging to the ecosystem. You've got coreless toilet rolls, so quite ecological. And then you have other things like, you know, using your time in the restroom a little bit earlier and having news that is set to your algorithm about what you like to read about being printed on your toilet paper. But I thought, look, it's a bit tongue in cheek, but I suppose I just wanted to say that that's what you're up against when you work in the world of innovation, that it is such an overused word and it is absolutely everywhere. So I'll just pop in here. So when I was pulling, there's so many different definitions. So, you know, I went for something from IHI, which looks at, you know, the model of improvement. So these differences then between improvement and innovation, that the model of improvement is focusing on optimizing your existing system, looking at defects, looking at things that aren't working quite well and optimizing them, making small changes in order to make them work better. Whereas innovation then requires a different model where you're creating something that's really fundamentally new and different to what we've experienced before. So I was interested to see that the IHI then followed up with this quote, that when we've reached the limits of an incrementalist approach and we're still not exactly where we want to be, then that's the time that we start to look at innovation. And I thought that was interesting because I don't quite agree. I think, you know, if we have an innovative mindset when we go into quality improvement opportunities, then I think we don't need to wait to make small step changes. If there's something available to us that we've scanned in our horizon and we think that we could apply immediately, then I say, you know, we go for it, that we don't wait to do incremental change. By the same token, of course, there needs to be a step-by-step process into how you get there. And I do think that's somewhere that quality improvement really does have the upper hand, that there is a really excellent availability of resources, not for the one in fact that's available freely to us in the HSE is so hugely beneficial, where we can actually plot out exactly what we need to do to make the change, to test our small tests of change and be sure that we're getting the outcome that we want to achieve in our quality improvement. So as much as I think that model works really well, I think we shouldn't shy away from going towards an innovative solution as at the other end of the process. If it's there, harness it, get people who are able to help you along that journey, collaborate with them and see if you can actually deliver something that allows for a step change right out of the box. So there's that old adage that, you know, not all improvement is innovation, but all innovation is improvement. And that's been around for a long time. And it should be true, but it's not necessarily the case. So, you know, first, yes, not all improvement is innovation, but it can be. There can be many elements of innovation within improvement outcomes. And then is all innovation an improvement? And I think we only need to think about the way banking has gone for us to realise that certainly there's a lot of innovation. We've moved essentially to a digital banking system, but I don't know if any of you are, you know, even yourselves struggling with trying to make contact with banks, but certainly I would have, you know, a lot of sympathy for older people, maybe people who aren't digital natives, who aren't digitally literate, trying to navigate that. So I think this is where it comes back to value creation, and we look at it in a business model, and we'll look at that a little bit later, that there is certainly improvement from the banking point of view. So presumably there are less buildings that they have to have rent on, there's less people that they have to have sitting in those buildings. So certainly it's an improvement for them in terms of bottom line. Is it an improvement for the user? I think probably for the most part, no. So just to frame then the whole idea of innovation and improvement, and I haven't given any references for these images because they're very generic. They're what you pull off the internet when you do a quick Google for innovation versus improvement, or, you know, change models. And I suppose just to kind of visualize there that the whole idea of quality improvement traditionally has been those incremental changes, those small changes over time, and that innovation then somehow has this idea of it being a radically improved model. And as I've mentioned earlier, and as I'll continue to mention in this talk, I think it's not as simple as that. It's a lot more nuanced, and I think there's a lot more crossover than we would maybe have given credit for previously. And then you've got this nice kind of matrix situation where you have, you know, the impact on the market versus the amount of progress, and whether it's an incremental change, whether you're doing something that's a breakthrough, something that's kind of disruptive in the space, or whether it's an absolute game changer, that there's a massive change in technology and a huge impact on the market. So I did want to draw your attention to these last ones, and I don't know, maybe everybody is familiar with them in the room, but I think they're always interesting to think about as well, the whole idea of red ocean and blue ocean strategy. And I do think that that is somewhere that there is some differentiation when it comes to improvement versus innovation in the traditional realm. So in the red ocean, you're trying to make something that exists better. And so in business terms, that would be going into a marketplace where it's maybe quite heavily saturated. So you're looking at, I think there's a lot of smartphones now, for instance. So if you're going into a market where you're trying to create a new smartphone, you're up against some giants. You've got Fitbit, you've got, you know, Apple Watch. I know all of the bigger, more, you know, high-end companies, Rolex, etc. They're all moving into the digital realm as well. So to try to make your value creation in that realm is really difficult, because you're operating what they call the red ocean, where it's a kill dog eat dog kill situation. That's why they call it the red ocean. Whereas blue ocean strategy is when you start to look into markets that don't yet exist, and you start to plan for that. So that is a kind of a whole game changer, and that is kind of your really far end of innovation, that real game changer, disruptive thinking, where you're actually bringing something to market, or in our case in healthcare, bringing something into the healthcare space that hasn't previously existed. And, you know, I think genomics, I think, is a good example of that, where previously we might have looked at lots of different ways to look at diagnostics, and actually genomics is going to be the huge game changer there, where we're going to anticipate diagnostics as opposed to having to go find them retrospectively. So just for a bit of context there. But ultimately, in terms of innovation and improvement, both are absolutely essential in any organization, and understanding their coexistence is really critical. And I would argue that it is really difficult to have an innovation culture in your organization without having an improvement culture. I think that that is where things start. And equally, I think that having that innovation culture is what's going to pull in, improvement into the realms of anticipatory medicine, moving into what we think our patient users are going to need in future in terms of service, in terms of medical interventions, etc. So I think they really complement one another, and I think they both have to be there. And I think in our organizations, we need to start to think about what's the expectation actually. Do we have more of an innovation portfolio? Do we have more of an improvement portfolio? Where are the crossovers, and is there a pipeline from one to the other? So I just wanted to really quickly go through, because I'm just kind of keeping an eye on time there, just really quickly, kind of from a practice point of view, where I think the kind of same and differences are in terms of quality improvement and innovation. So I think in terms of intention, we're very same. We both want to have better situations. We want value creation for our patients. We want value creation for society. We want value creation for the staff, for our co-workers. We are generally just trying to make things better. In terms of systems, I think there's a real mindfulness from both innovation and quality improvement that we're working within a systems environment. So everything that we do in one part of the system has repercussions. There's a ripple effect across the system. And I think, systems thinking is becoming far more, there's a lot more awareness around it. And I think people understand now that even though we sometimes unfortunately have to operate in silos, we shouldn't plan in silos. We shouldn't be developing new things in silos. And so that systems orientation is really important, and I think is paramount in both areas. And equally data. I mean, I loved one of the first things I remember from the RCPI course, John, is there's no stories without data, and there's no data without stories. And I think that piece is becoming really important, both obviously in quality improvement and in innovation. That the story is really important. Creating a future, creating this kind of future state, what it's going to look like, but it has to be backed up with data. And even things like working in the area of design thinking, where it can seem like it's a lot of post-its on the wall, but actually we're really being pushed to apply methods like action design research on top of something like design thinking to really bring in that data extraction and really be driven and guided by data in all of the decisions that we make. So in mindset, I think we are kind of the same and different. There is certainly similarities in terms of mindset, that we are people who are drawn to quality improvement and drawn to innovation tend to have growth mindsets. They're interested in thinking about things in a new way, in learning new things, and they want to make things better. And I think there's that duality of role. There's that understanding that they want to spend a lot of their time doing their job, but they also want to spend a significant portion of their time thinking about how the job can be done better. And I think if there's to be any difference between the mindset between quality improvement and innovation, it's probably the lens. And I'll look at that later as well, about whether we're looking kind of in our own domain area immediately right now here in our department, or whether we're looking in the broader context across health. There is probably a difference in terms of the change, the degree of change. There are things that would qualify as being more innovative. There should be an element of step change for an innovation to be truly in effect, and that it's small changes and small improvements can be the focus of quality improvement. So I think there is a difference there in terms of the degree of change, but I don't like to think of it as some sort of arc where quality improvement is at the bottom and then the good stuff is at the top of innovation. To me, it's more of a sliding scale, and at any time you can be erring more towards the quality improvement side and more towards the innovation side. In terms of domain areas, so I suppose, just like I was just mentioning there, that in quality improvement, I suppose we tend to operate predominantly within our own domain area. In terms of systems thinking, I think we understand that what we're changing here in terms of stakeholder mapping, we have to maybe look outwards around who else is going to be affected in the changes that we're going to make. But we may not borrow too far outside of medicine or outside of our own organization. Whereas in innovation, you tend to, I think the hallmark actually often in innovation is that you have very clearly borrowed from outside of your own industry area or outside of your own domain area. And we think about, those kind of the I-shaped profiles. I think, in medicine, we have traditionally, medicine has had a very I-shaped profile, deep domain knowledge in one area. I think over time, we've become more T-shaped. And, you know, we do have more, you know, we're bringing experiences from other domains of our life, or we've had previous careers, or whatever it is. And in fact, we can be sometimes pie-shaped then. We have two deep domain areas and then a horizontal plane of things like teamwork and all of the other pieces that we bring in. But I would say that that's probably more clearly evident in innovation projects where you are working maybe necessarily with other industries, or thinking about things in a different way outside of your deep domain area of knowledge. In terms of tools, we share a lot of tools and we have a lot of different tools. So I was thinking a lot about this, and I draw on a lot of the tools that I learned on the quality improvement course when I'm working in my role of innovation. And I remember when I was doing the course, I had just come off the innovation course, and I was thinking, that's a tool that I think I could apply in here. And I think maybe a good example of that is that when I came on the course, and obviously we had to bring a project with us, I felt that what we had, retrospectively, we had arrived with the problem, and yes, that changed over time. But I think that that in practice there should be opportunities to sense make a little bit more about the organisation, what the priorities are, you know, what is coming down the line in terms of policy, and kind of looking at the earlier stages before you decide that you're going to jump into project on a page, what I'm going to deliver. And I've no doubt that speaks more to my the fact that I'm a beginner in the area of quality improvement. I'm sure John wouldn't dream of entering into a quality improvement project that he hadn't already done that kind of work, but that was new to me. But yeah, so there are certainly, you know, elements that we change or that we share around, you know, lean thinking, lean methodologies, all of that type of thing. And then there are some that are quite that we have different names for, but they have the same function and purpose. And I'm really going to fly through because this time has gone so quickly. And so as I was saying then with the lens, I do think that, you know, we can sometimes need a broader lens to be able to see what's available to us in terms of innovation. You know, looking horizon scanning, looking at, you know, weak signals, micro trends, mega trends, what's happening internationally around the globe, how funding is happening, you know, that to take that much broader lens, looking into other industries you might not think of, you know, Disney and, you know, Imagineering and those kinds of areas, to try to be influenced and inspired about what we might be able to change within our own environment. And then I do think risk is a different one, and this is maybe something we might talk about later, because I know I'm not going to have enough time to talk about this, but you know, there does need to be a lot of comfort in the area of risk when it comes to innovation. I suppose in quality improvement, because there's traditionally less of a step change, it's less of a risk. But with your permission, John, we might come back to that later, because I do think it's important. But what I would like to say that is really, there should be no competition between quality improvement and innovation. I think they're extremely complementary. And I'm always interested in the origin of words. I was looking at that, you know, the differences between synergy, or the opposite of synergy is, you know, antagonism. And I'd hate to think that would be a word that we would ever have associated between quality improvement and innovation, because it's just so unnecessary. So I just wanted to tell you very briefly about what's available to the front line in terms of trying to drive innovation within their own settings. So as you know, I work for the Spark Innovation Programme, and this is our team here, and we're co-funded by the National Doctors Training Programme, the ONMSD and the Health and Social Care Professionals. And we're delighted that this year we have our first, we've traditionally had a fellow, Rachel McNamara is our medical fellow this year from NDTP, but this year we have our first ONMSD fellow, and then our first HSCP fellow as well in Amy and Dermot. So delighted to be able to now represent right across the clinical channels within the health service. And then just to give you a little flavour, that we also have some guest team members. So we're very interested in the area of design in the Spark Innovation Programme. And so we work closely with Trevor Vaugh and Dr. Trevor and Dr. Martin Ryan, who are both designers with a background at Maynooth University. And, you know, design has become a really important part of what we're trying to deliver, about designing good services, and the different lens and the different focus that design can bring when we're trying to plan for improvement and innovation within the health service. So, you know, we're really getting behind that in terms of focus, attention and funding. And we've now funded a designer in residence at St James's Hospital, part funded that, and also part funded a user experience designer and a service designer at the Mater Hospital, and a maker expert at St James's Hospital, who do have a more of a bent towards the med tech, the medical device area of innovation. So their maker helps them to be able to realise some of their areas. So I won't go into great detail around the different initiatives that we run, but I have got a QR code there that will bring you to the Spark Seed funding competition that's happening at the moment. But I suppose just to kind of highlight to you that really we're in the business of encouraging and supporting frontline innovation staff, empowering and engaging them, providing design expertise. As I said, that's an area that we really believe very strongly in, giving them access to emerging technology, and then building that network of innovators across the country, like you're doing here with the QPS, the Talk Time series, trying to bring these like-minded people together to affect change. And I wanted to give you a quick overview of these two areas that have come through seed funding, but I don't think I'll have time, but I suppose I just really wanted to kind of highlight to you that sometimes there can be I think this particular project had more of a quality improvement bent initially, and that it was a doctor who had identified that there wasn't a clear protocol for the management of trauma upon arrival in trauma receiving centres in Ireland, and so he developed Trauma Doc and came to the Spark Seed Fund in order to be able to get some investment to design his piece of work and to, I suppose, popularise it and socialise it across Ireland. And it's now actually being taken on and being adopted by all trauma receiving centres in Ireland. And it's estimated that it's saving in excess of €300,000 per annum as a result of doing that. And then this one may be slightly more with a digital twist, an app to monitor weight gain in cardiac patients to highlight to them, I suppose, some indications of early cardiac failure when they are experiencing water retention, and I suppose giving them an indication that they should bring that to the attention of their healthcare practitioner. I won't have time to go through to that, so I will just move quickly to the very end. And I was thinking about how to finish this, and I know, John, you asked me to give some resources that maybe people could go to, and I was thinking about, if people are interested in innovation, what would I advise them, if they wanted to be more innovative in their work? And really the biggest piece of advice I would give is to read, listen and watch broadly and completely indiscriminately. I listen to podcasts from everything from art to insect collection to innovation to health to medtech, really trying to get a very broad sense, because it's surprising where inspiration comes around how people manage challenges in other industries that are outside of healthcare. And I know that quality improvement, and particularly from a safety point of view, has borrowed heavily from the aviation industry, or maybe they would suggest that they borrowed heavily from medicine. But the point being that our challenges are rarely unique. That generally speaking, they can be often shared, and if not, elements of them can be inspired by one another. Look for diversity in your places of work, in your meetings, in your committees. Try not to have the same people thinking all the same, the yes brigade in your room. Try to get that diversity of thought, the kind of benign antagonists, as I like to call myself, in my work area. And then I put it in again about learning more about innovation. Read, watch and listen indiscriminately. Please join the network of innovators across Ireland. Make yourselves known. Please join our mailing list for the Spark Innovation Programme. And I've left a couple of touch points there as well, looking at the Creativity Leap, looking at Built to Innovate, two really great books that I love about innovation, and then a couple of podcasts that I thought people might find interesting as well. And of course, a great introduction to design innovation frameworks by Frank Devitt and his colleagues. Actually, Trevor is one of those. The Arrive book as well. So I'm sorry that I've rushed through that last bit, John. I got carried away there in the early stages, and I've well and truly run out of time, so my apologies.
Not at all, Caitriona. That was fantastic, and you really packed so much in there, and thank you so much, and lots of food for thought. And I suppose, first of all, I'm just going to welcome anybody who's on the call today from the Spark community, and you're very welcome. And I think it's great to see folks kind of in these domains kind of coming together. And Caitriona, you're so energized about all this and passionate about it. And I suppose my first question before we go into some from the chat is what does this give to people who engage in innovation? Why would I, as somebody who might be interested in innovation, want to get engaged in it? What am I going to get back from it?
Well, I think that healthcare practitioners are really underutilized in terms of the breadth of skills, expertise, insight that they carry from doing their day-to-day work. So, You know, I think most people who work in healthcare are really inspired to do it because they want to help patients at the other end. It's, you know, there is, I think, that element of being, you know, kind of a calling to that type of work. But ultimately, once you actually get into that type of work, you tend to deliver very similar types of work day to day to day. And, you know, we work in an exceptionally busy system. When we talk about that duality of role, there often isn't space for that. So I suppose there is that we see there's a real desire from healthcare workers to be putting their hands up to say, I have an idea. And I think that they just get so much more energy from it. I think they feel a sense of agency. They feel important in their work. They feel their voices are heard. And, you know, I think that's one of the great things, especially about what Spark provides, is that, you know, it's a direct access to that support. So you don't, there are some of our funds where you do have to have senior leadership support because we're giving out significant amount of money that we really want to see change being affected. And so in those cases, you do have to have senior leadership behind you. But for our Spark Seed funding, for our Ignite funding, these are individuals that are coming forward and putting their hand up. And I think if ever there was an indication that there's an appetite for people to do that, it's at the moment. You know, it's so busy. We're coming out of a pandemic. We had our, you know, our cyber attack, and they keep coming. You know, each of our initiatives, one is as successful or more successful than the last in terms of uptake. And so clearly the passion is out there, and we don't need everybody to be innovative. In fact, the system can't handle that. And we do need people to be delivering the work on a daily basis, but we do also need to take those people who have a mindset towards change, improvement and innovation and leverage that and give them an opportunity and a platform to be able to execute and use their energy for good.
Yeah, and I get the sense that there's fun in this, and there's the ability to be creative and like you've said, kind of think outside the box a bit. And
yeah, and there's not enough opportunity for that, I think, in medicine. And that's what I was going to talk about in terms of risk. And I think one of the disadvantages of quality improvement living where it does within our system is that it often lives alongside patient safety and risk mitigation.
yeah, and that's
And I
a
think
good.
that's really important. Of course, that's really important in anything that we would deliver, and you know, any innovation that we would deliver has to have patient safety at its core. But there's a real challenge there. There's a constant argument going on because, you know, quality, you know, risk mitigation is reliant on keeping things the status quo, and innovation is about trying to shake up the status quo and move it forward. So I think it's a really difficult line to try to balance. And I suppose now I have that experience of being in an environment where I don't sit under the umbrella of quality improvement. I obviously work very closely alongside it, but it means that I get to be a little bit more experimental and a little bit, maybe I have a broader lens and maybe bring in some elements that wouldn't traditionally be found in the world of medicine or within the hospital environment, and go for the kind of the crazy that could never possibly work idea, and then start to kind of pare it back about, well, okay, we couldn't deliver that, but we could shape it to take an element of it, or this could influence something else. And so by the time I actually move it back towards quality improvement, I've tried to take out the real risk piece. The risk then that's left behind is the risk of change, and that's always difficult. You know, it's always difficult for people to engage with change on a broad scale, because it's very exposing. You know, it exposes your culture, it exposes your capabilities and your capacities within your organization. So, you know, that's always going to be a challenge in terms of innovation delivery in the healthcare space, and particularly in Ireland. You know, the way that traditionally the way it's remunerated and run, and so yeah, that's a big hurdle to have to get over.
And Anne Jones is asking that question there, very much on that, you know, about, I suppose, our culture of being risk averse. And I think it's very hard to imagine innovation without being comfortable to some degree with failure and that things won't work.
Absolutely. And, you know, again, if you can borrow in from the business world, you know, venture capitalists will say that they invest in businesses and they know that 90% of their investments will fail. So they're holding out for the 10% ones that do well to try to recoup some of their wasted money. And, you know, that is a reality. So we do have to be very comfortable with failure. But that's not to say we play loose and fast with things like safety or regulation or quality. You know, there are ways of us creating PDSA, I think, you know, small tests of change using prototyping, building something at
Yeah,
a prototype stage before we deliver it out, and also failing fast is really important in innovation as well. That you kind of build it and test it with your users at the other end as quickly as possible, and kind of it's like changing the wheel while the car is still going, while the system is still
yeah.
running, implementing these changes and checking. But yeah, so being risk averse, unfortunately, is really challenging in the world of innovation, and it's there in medicine. We can't get away from it. It's important. We have to be risk averse. That's what keeps people
Yes, of
alive on a
course.
daily basis.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think there's shared kind of things that, quality improvement does. Again, same things of failing fast, of small tests, try it once kind of and learn from that. And I imagine again that's a shared kind of, value is the importance of learning and learning quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on every level that you could imagine, learning, as I said, from external organizations, learning about the tools and the theories of innovation, and then, as you say, learning from failure. And I think that we have to try to maybe separate that failure again in our context can be catastrophic outcomes for patients, for instance. That might be our kind of traditional understanding of failure, and so we might need to find a better word so
Yeah.
to capture what we call advancing, and advancing while learning, reflective practice. This is all
Yeah.
important and necessary. There will be no movement forward without taking some risk, but of course that has to be done safely.
Yeah, yeah, I think absolutely. I think you can have safe failure. I think once you know what you're doing. Uh, One thing I was just wondering, I suppose a lot of when people think about innovation, they often think particularly around products, technology. But I suppose one of the things I'm interested in, big crossover quality improvement, is taking that kind of quality and innovation and design thinking into the service, redesign. What are your thoughts on that? And is there a difference between product design and service design?
Yes and no. I mean, ultimately, when you're designing anything, you're designing it from the perspective of the user at the other end.
Yeah,
So obviously, that's where there is there's a very clear similarity there. In terms of product design, then I suppose on the pipeline of that, you've got regulation, you've got all of that kind of stuff that has to happen in terms of product design, and then from the designer point of view, you've got the look and feel of the product, you've got the materials you're going to use, you've got kind of all of that user experience element, and that's both for a product in terms of a physical product and a digital product. So the interaction level of a digital product, how that's going to work, and there's a whole element of digital design that's in there. In terms of service design, and I know this is an area that we're really interested in. That there is, again, you're designing from the patient's perspective, but I suppose it's actually if you like, it's a little bit more of the low-hanging fruit, because you're not restricted by regulation, and you get to kind of design it bespoke to each service area. So this is something that we're really interested in looking at the moment, and we're working on a project at the moment using MaxFax, and looking at, now there is a product element to that, but ultimately the product element was informed by getting a full understanding of the patient journey, their full understanding of how they experienced the service, where the pain points were for them. Like we would have done process mapping for quality improvement when we were looking at service changes, and in the design thinking world we would call that patient journey mapping, looking at pain points, where the gains could be, and trying to design services to mitigate against those negative experiences. But yeah, watch this space. There's a lot more happening in the design, the service design area, and we're really interested and very excited about what it has to offer for healthcare.
yeah, and I think that's another really big synergy. Again, is this idea of figuring out what's important to people, to patients, and to staff, and these tools and approaches can be very valuable, but can also take you off in the wrong direction if you don't do that bit at the very beginning of really understanding, what is the problem, and what is the need.
Absolutely, and that was probably what I was referring to about what I would consider a flaw in my project when I was with you guys, that we didn't have that full understanding, because actually it wasn't until we entered into PDSA, or maybe, to be fair, when we were doing the fishbone diagram and looking at kind of, you know, what's contributing to the problem, and that we started to get a sense of, we've come at this from completely the wrong angle. And we had actually, you know, we hadn't looked at the patient element really. We had looked at the staff experience. And I think that's something that when you're looking at service design, you very clearly map out the experience of all people, to try to to actually, at the problem formulation stage, for you to actually define what the problem is that you're going to start looking at. And I do think that there is great synergy there. And, you know, I'm going to put it out to you there now, John. We're up for it. We want to work with you around this. You know, this is something we would really want to start making an impact around for healthcare in Ireland.
Yeah, look, I agree. I think, in listening to you again, there's so much in common, and so much, I think, you know, to be learned from each other, but also strengthened. And I think the interdependence is very, very, you know, clear. And I think the ability to be able to make kind of progress together, I think, is absolutely clear. So, Caitriona, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much. Some lovely comments there from Adrian there, kind of innovation is high functioning, quality improvement, excellence. So, you know, I think, you know, in many ways, little distinction, and from the point of view of the service user or the staff involved, I think that's important. Bespoke design service, love that, Caitriona. Yeah, so you're getting lots of nice feedback. Caitriona, you know, I look forward to kind of keeping the channels open. I think, you know, Spark has been a great initiative, and I think it has energized people, and I look forward to seeing kind of lots of folks from the Spark community, you know, staying involved with us here. But I think it's a two-way traffic, and I think we've a lot to learn from each other. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, John. Lovely to see you all. And thanks very much to everybody listening. Oh, yeah, I never said we've got the summit. Don't forget, come and join
Your
us if you
summit,
want to be part
fantastic.
of the innovation community. And yeah, we'd love to have you join us on the 16th of June in Dublin, where we'll be talking all things innovation, and actually service design, if that's something that you're particularly interested
Excellent.
in, what design brings into the healthcare system. There's a big focus on that this year.
Super. Well, thank you very much. And we've got a QR code there and all to get people along. So thanks, Caitriona.
Thank you.
Folks, I'm just going to wrap up again, just to make people aware of the handbook patient safety from the Oxford University press that just has been released. So obviously big Irish input into that, and thanks to Peter Lackman and to my fellow associate editors there. But lots of Irish input into that book. So you know, it's a very practical approach to patient safety, and I think it could be really, really helpful if people were looking for somewhere to start. Please log into the QPS Ireland network map and let us know where you are. And again, a shout out to all the folks from Spark today. You know, very much like to see you being part of this quality improvement and quality and patient safety network in the country. So get yourself on the map. Similarly with Q, and again, a shout out to the Spark folks, and there is a strong innovation element to Q. So please do look at the Q website, and if you're interested in joining Q, please get in touch with Caroline, Lennon, Nally, and we'd love to see the innovation input into Q strengthen. And that obviously is not just in Ireland, it's Northern Ireland and across the rest of the UK. So you know, that there's lots of opportunity there for shared learning. And then just to put a date in your diary for this day, 2 weeks, our colleagues Ciara Kirk, Claire Kinahan and Magella Grealish will be talking about the person-centered medicines review in general practice and the eye sympathy project, and that's in 2 weeks' time for the next QPS webinar. So thanks. As you log out, you'll get a request just to give us some feedback. And like I said, we do look at it, we do learn from it, and we do use it. So please take a few moments just to share that with us. And I'd like to thank Caitriona again for her company and for joining us today. And we'll see you all in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you very much. Thanks, Naomi and Maureen and all the folks in the background.